were you ever accused of having sexually molested Brett Barnes?
Won't answer that.
Do you know a person by the name of Macaulay Culkin?
Yes.
No. To your knowledge, were you ever accused of having sexually molested Macaulay?
That's an instruction not to answer on that one.
What's up guys, Enigma here, and I'm a qualified body language analyst, and today we're going to be looking at this quite creepy interview where Michael Jackson is being confronted about the sexual assault allegations made against him. Now this video isn't me trying to prove if he's lying or not, I'm just going to be reading the body language in what is quite clearly a very tense and very uncomfortable situation. So let's take a look.
Mr. Jackson, in the latter portion of 1993, there were some allegations leveled at you concerning improper conduct with some young boys. I assume you're familiar with the fact that those allegations were raised. Is that right?
Yes.
In fact, there was ultimately at least two grand jury inquiries into that I am currently aware of, although counsel tells me there may have been a third. Were you aware that grand jury investigations were conducted into those allegations?
Yes.
Strike that, did you know at the time that the grand jury was investigating these matters that they were in fact investigating? In other words, you didn't find out after it had completed. You knew in advance that people were being subpoenaed to testify.
In advance?
Yeah, poorly phrased. Let me rephrase it. It is my understanding that some of Neverland Valley Ranch employees were subpoenaed to testify before the grand jury. Do you know that to be the case as well?
Yes.
So look at the eye contact here. He's making far above average levels of eye contact. He's practically staring at the man. What this shows is that he has a vested interest in understanding what the man's saying to him. He's deeply attentive or interested. Michael doesn't really say much here, but all of his attention is focused on what the guy is saying to him. Basically, he just takes it very seriously. He does do a distancing behavior when he's confronted with the allegations. He does look away briefly. This is his brain basically trying to protect him from a stressor. And he looks away so he doesn't have to give his attention to something he quite clearly fears. He is afraid of these allegations, but he's very attentive, and I think anyone would distance themselves when confronted with such huge and nasty allegations. When the guy interrupts him, he tenses his mouth and begins to pacify. He really wants to talk and gets stressed when he's not given the opportunity. This shows that he really wants to speak and defend himself, but he's afraid to interrupt, so it does suggest that he's afraid of being confrontational with the man.
Are you familiar with a person named Jordy Chandler?
We're not going there. Don't answer. We're not going to get into who he knows and doesn't know. If you want to ask a question, go ahead and ask it, but I believe it's beyond the scope of discoverable matters in the case.
Whether he knows of Jordy Chandler?
Right.
You're not going to allow me to ask him any questions about Jordan Chandler in any fashion?
Well, we'll take them one by one, but
I can't ask him whether he knows him. I suppose that would sort of preclude other ones, don't you think?
yeah, probably would.
And may I ask for the record what the basis upon which you are going to refuse to allow this witness to disclose whether he knows Mr. Jordan Chandler? As you know, counsel, during the course of discovery in this case, you have already gone into, and I think Mr. Sanger has already gone into at some depth, a deposition that was taken in the case of Jordy Chandler versus Michael Jackson, given by Adrian McManus. There are issues that are certainly relevant to my interest as to why you inquired as to those depositions that Adrian gave. And you're now telling me I can't even ask whether he knows the man or go into any such areas?
Yeah, let me
Isn't there
cover
a
that.
quote that comes to mind of what's good for the goose is good for the gander?
Oh, come on, Counsel.
What?
He stops fame.
So you can see when Michael's lawyer or attorney is talking on his behalf, he really wants to jump in and talk. He keeps tensing his mouth and his body language reacts to what's being said. When we tense our mouths, it shows that we're trying to speak. And our conscience actually has to hold the mouth shut because it knows better. Michael really feels like he should speak up and defend himself here, but his conscience is telling him to keep quiet and let his lawyer do the talking.
Let me just make sure my understanding is clear. Is it your position that you will instruct Mr. Jackson not to answer any questions that pertain to the issue of Jordy Chandler in any way, whether it be claims leveled by Jordy Chandler, if any, or discovery in the Jordy Chandler case vis-a-vis Adrian McManus's deposition and allegations that she testified falsely? Any of that you're not going to let him go into?
That's right. I believe that's correct. With respect to the motivations that are, in your view, germane to the allegations made in the complaint, my client has testified that he knows nothing about those matters that you want to explore his motivations on. So therefore, there's a lack of foundation. But let's just go do what you want to do.
You've raised something that sort of catches me by surprise. You say your client has testified that he knows nothing about these matters. Is this at today's deposition you're referring to, or some other deposition that I was not present at?
Today.
That is strange, since I've not asked about that issue until just now. I have not asked about the allegations specifically. I have asked about investigation.
So Michael finds what the guy's saying funny for some reason. Again, I know nothing about the context, and it isn't my business to take sides and accuse Michael of anything. I'm simply reading the body language, and no research has been done into the context and background of this video. But Michael does find something funny here, and he uses the paper as a way of blocking his face. This is a common behavior of someone who's trying to hide their emotions. He knows that laughing in this situation is inappropriate, so he tries to hide his face and fakes a yawn to suppress his facial expressions. He's afraid of being seen as rude or inconsiderate and doesn't want to upset the guy speaking. He then goes back to maintaining high levels of eye contact, which shows that he's comfortable in the situation.
Were you aware that Jordan Chandler or his family on his behalf filed a lawsuit against you?
Yes.
Okay. Were you aware that at some point in time in that lawsuit, Adrian McManus gave her deposition?
I'm not positive.
Your answer confuses me. How do you mean you're not positive? You don't know whether she gave her deposition or not?
Exactly.
So then, if I understand it correctly, you are not going to allow me to go into any areas in connection with Brett Barnes. Is that right?
Well, you can ask. There's nothing I can think of, but I'm not going to categorically say you can't ask anything about him, but I don't think there's anything relevant. So irrelevant that I'm not inclined to let you get into it unless there's an area that you believe is directly tied to the case.
Well, I believe it, but I have a feeling that my believing it's not going to convince you of much.
When they mention the lawsuit, Michael does rapid blinking. He also distances slightly by leaning back in his chair. These are all signs that he feels threatened by the question. Now again, this doesn't suggest guilt, only that he's very uncomfortable with the question, as anyone would be, to be honest. He feels emotional trauma when it's brought up, and that causes his heart rate to increase as a result of the stress. He keeps showing signs of stress when asked questions, and he avoids any eye contact. He touches his neck and gives off a bunch of other pacifying and distancing behaviors. He is very uncomfortable being asked these questions, and that is perfectly natural.
To your knowledge, Mr. Jackson, were you ever accused of having sexually molested Brett Barnes?
Won't answer that.
Do you know a person by the name of Macaulay Culkin?
Yes.
Get your answer.
So you're going to let him answer questions about Macaulay Culkin?
Let him answer that one.
To your knowledge, were you ever accused of having sexually molested Macaulay?
That's an instruction not to answer on that one.
So when he's asked if he's been accused of sexually molesting this person, he again gives off the classic signs of stress and anxiety. He also briefly gives off the shock response when he tenses his eyebrows. He is very shocked at hearing these allegations, and he's deeply emotionally affected by them being brought up. You can see his baseline behavior shift dramatically here. He goes from making strong levels of eye contact to constantly darting his eyes across the room and being unable to look at the interviewer for any extended amounts of time.
This is as good a copy of the document as I have available to me at this time. Let me ask you this. Do you recognize the handwriting on these two sheets?
Yes,
Do you know whose handwriting it is?
it's mine.
Do you know what these documents are?
Yeah.
What is this?
Crazy stories that people have created. Things I wanted to set straight in an interview.
Do you know with whom this interview was?
The next, I think it could have been Diane Sawyer, whatever the interview was that I wanted to do. I wanted to set the record straight, that if people hear a lie long enough, people believe it, that people have lied on me. I'm a black American and I'm proud of it, and I'm honored of it. The bleach skin rumor, which is a rumor, I don't bleach my skin. They once said I wanted a white kid to play me as a child, which was a rumor. Inauguration rumor, saying I didn't want to do President Clinton's inauguration. I'm not gay. This says,
When Michael's answering the questions, he keeps his eyes on the paper and doesn't look at the guy asking him. This is another distancing behavior. He's trying to distract himself from the stressor by avoiding looking at him. This is a strong sign that he's afraid of the guy and his questions. He's feeling threatened by them. Now, this doesn't really say that he's guilty, merely that he's afraid of being asked these questions. However, excessive distancing behaviors are a sign of a liar, but that really does depend on the context and the questions asked. I could look more into this and try and determine if he's lying, but I don't want to get into that. When he's explaining himself and the situation, he's able to maintain normal levels of eye contact with the interviewer, which shows that he's comfortable addressing these points, and I think everything he's saying here is completely truthful and genuine based on the body language. What he's saying here is a prepared statement. It's very obvious from the lack of synchronization in his body language. His body language doesn't really match what he's saying. It doesn't flow initially. He takes time to get into it. He doesn't look at the guy and keeps his eyes fixated on one spot. This is him trying to remember his prepared words. If he was improvising on the spot, he would have made eye contact to emphasize the things he's saying. He would have moved in sync with his words. But again, this isn't a sign of deception. People prepare words in advance all the time. It's perfectly natural.
don't judge a person unless you have spoken to them one-on-one, which is true. Because what you hear is a lie, untrue. I can't make out this part there.
It is illegible in portions, that's true.
And Jesus said to love the children and be like children. Be youthful and be innocent and be pure and honorable. He was talking to his apostles, and they were fighting over who's the greatest among themselves. And he said, whoever humbled yourself like this child is the greatest among me. And he always surrounded himself with children. And that's how I was raised, to believe and to be like that and to imitate that. So I don't know what you're trying to make out of it. I made a list of things. When I get angry enough, I write down what I want to say and what I want to talk about to set the record straight. Because you get to a point where you get tired of people lying. I get tired of situations like this, where people completely lie on me, and I'm sick of it.
The video operator, we're off the record. I have the conclusion, 411.
So all the body language he's giving off is completely synchronized with what he's saying. It's totally genuine, and all of his movements show that he's deeply passionate about what's being discussed. This is a really interesting video. You can quite clearly see that he's trying to be polite and doesn't want to overstep the mark. He is being very cautious and very deliberate about what he's saying, and does show a lot of fear against the guy asking the questions. There are numerous reasons as to why he acted how he did here, and I'm not going to try and tell you that he's guilty or not. I would have to have more footage, a strong knowledge of all the allegations, before I could pick apart his body language to determine if he's lying or being deceptive. One of the reasons why the polygraph tests are hated are due to the fact that all it reads are a person's stress levels. People then misinterpret these readings as an indicator as to whether someone's guilty or not. The polygraph machine was never designed for that. And like the polygraph machine, all I do is read someone's stress levels based on the body language they give off. I can tell you if he's uncomfortable or feeling intimidated, but to tell you that he's lying would take a lot more evidence and a lot more footage, and it would be unfair for me to comment without extensive amounts of evidence. So thank you so much for watching this video, guys. If you did enjoy it, please be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more content, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.